Morning. We talk a little bit about the drama between Gaetz and McCarthy this morning, and more talk about government funding, shutdowns, and all that. Just wonderful content. Good morning, and I see Uncle Steve's got first blood this morning, and hey, I saw some of the pictures on Facebook from y'all's fishing trip yesterday. Some good looking catfish. I can't wait. So, all right, here we go. Let's talk about this. As everybody knows, we've been dealing with the whole government shutdown thing for, of course, far too long, and I get tired of it every year for the last 20 or so years, it seems, maybe a little longer. Oh damn, sorry, I just glanced over and saw the comment. George Constitution Media just completely broke my train of thought. 4-year-old broke her leg at the trampoline park, so he's off for a few days. Brother, I hope she feels better. A broken leg is no joke. And at 4, we went through that with my eldest. She was a little older than that. I think she was 6. She broke her arm, and yeah, it's no fun having a hurt kid. It's not. And speaking from experience as well, it's no fun being a hurt kid either. And they need lots of hugs when they're like that. And Michael Cigarillo says the Republican Party make it hard to support them, don't they? You know what? Let's talk about that for a minute, and we'll get into the Gaetz versus McCarthy thing forthwith. Michael, you're absolutely right. He says, I mean, let's keep it real. The only reason anyone votes for them is because their opposition is so terrible by comparison. I have said many, many times over the years, and I mean, since I was a teenager, you know, you're all familiar with the aphorism that's attributed usually to Winston Churchill, although I think that's an anachronism. That if you're not a liberal when you're a kid, you don't have a heart. And if you're not a conservative when you're an adult, you don't have a brain. And perhaps I'm just a heartless old cuss because I have always been extremely conservative. At my most liberal, when I was a teenager, I thought maybe that there was a good argument for the life of the mother in abortion cases, and that was before I had a better understanding of the medical truth surrounding that claim, which of course, and without getting into the abortion thing, but just for an example, there are no life of the mother cases. It's never the case that the correct maneuver in the case of a distressed labor, that introducing additional risk to the mother's life is the correct answer. The correct answer is to remove the child. Murdering the child in that process introduces additional risk to the mother. And I don't see a reasonable exception to that statement. My point, Michael says, not being against pot smoking is as liberal as I have ever been in my life. Yes, and I would actually argue that not being against pot smoking is a very conservative position, or more correctly stated, the conservative position on the use of illicit drugs is morally, responsibly, and intelligently, there is not a good argument for the use of illicit drugs. And hey, I'm a smoker, and I know better, but I like my cigarettes, and that's the best argument you could make for it. The freedom argument. And of course, the fact of the matter is that there's no room in the Constitution, as we've discussed many times on this show, with reference to the 18th and 21st Amendments vis-a-vis prohibition on alcohol. There is no room in the Constitution, no authority granted to the federal government. In fact, that authority is explicitly prohibited from the federal government by the existence of the 10th Amendment for there to be a control on substances. It is unconstitutional for any substance production, consumption, distribution, etc., to be restricted by law. And I've always made the argument, with reference to the Democrat versus the Republican, that the Republican is weak and the Democrat is evil. The fact is that the Republican Party generally, and I still go to GOP meetings. In fact, this week, Thursday, will be the Rockdale County GOP meeting, where we'll be at Amici's and we'll have a guest speaker and we'll have some discussions, and I'll film it, and the speaker will make some statements, and I'll probably raise my hand and point out the weakness and spinelessness of the speaker's position and whatever it is that the speaker at the event, not the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. I probably won't have any interaction with that lefty loony for quite some time. We'll see what happens. Anyway, the Republicans are an insufficient champion for a mostly conservative country, right? Like we've said over and over again, there are no blue states in the United States. There are only red states with varying degrees of blue cancer. States which consistently and reliably go blue, you can look at them on the electoral maps, and they have one or two spots where the majority are Democrat in a city. And it just happens that that majority is heavily concentrated in one city. The fact is that larger cities buy votes. If you live out in the country, right? You load up your trash in the back of a pickup truck and take it to the dump. The city doesn't pay for sanitation workers to come around and pick up your trash, right? If you live out in the country, you might get your water out of a well and flush your toilet into a septic tank. The city doesn't bill you for water resources or sewage. You live further out in the country. The further out in the country you live, the less likely you are to call animal control to come and deal with a dangerous beastie. The more likely you are to simply grab your rifle and go put it down. You get deeper into the city, and not only are those things true, but the degree of likelihood that the government actually pays for your food, subsidizes your housing, etc. Right? We're moving to the country, going to eat a lot of peaches as soon as humanly possible. But we've been homeschooling our children for, a decade now, and intend to continue with that down that route. Which means two things there. My children are not costing the government money, which the government, by the way, is still taking from me at gunpoint under threat and pain of death. And, more importantly, my children will retain their original genitalia ideologically, because I'm not allowing them to be exposed to that cancer. But those cities consistently vote blue because they're paid to. Because the promise of the left is totalitarian. Crib to grave care. The promise of the left is the abolition of individual responsibility. The promise of the left is that while we will not allow you to thrive, we will, to the greatest extent possible, with whatever capital we can take at gunpoint from you involuntarily, guarantee your borderline survival. Let's be fair. That is a very, very attractive offer, especially to a generation raised by television. And I mean, it is current year, 2023. TV's been around for a long time. It's raised a lot of babies. Don't get it twisted. I know that knowing is half the battle. The TV taught me that. Now, my old man, Sergeant Major, taught me that extreme violence is the other half of the battle. And the Army reminded me of that in Afghanistan. But let me tell you something. I watched G.I. Joe. I learned that knowing is half the battle. And I grew up to be a military intelligence operator. I mean, let's just be fair. I also watched He-Man, and from that I learned that I could change a spare tire without a jack if the mood strikes. That's a past tense statement. But I'm old and crippled now. I can't do that shit anymore. I don't just go around snatching engines out of the fronts of cars without a cherry picker anymore. That's beyond me at this age. But generations raised by television have been taught to mutilate themselves and rely on the government, capital, for opportunity, for mere survival. So you're right, St. Michael. It is a problem that our Republican Party, as it is currently constituted, is a very, very unreliable and unworthy champion. But it is also the only champion that we have. And that's unfortunate. And I would love to see I'm not a big fan of third parties. Generally, largely because they tend to be psychotic leftists, right? Like the Green Party, or the Libertarian Party. They tend to be psychotic, open borders, pro-abortion leftists. And I have a hard time with that. And, for a while, I thought I thought that I wanted to be more involved with the Libertarian Party, but the fact is that the Libertarian Party is not a party of liberty. They're a party of libertine. And that is not acceptable. That's not healthy. It's not safe, and it certainly isn't sustainable. It's unfortunate, but the third party run is always way too far left for me. I would love to see a third party that was as conservative as the Republican Party purports to be. But we don't have that. And for now, the best we have until some more of us run for office. And I'd love to. I'd love to run for an office. But, and this is one of the problems with the politicians that we have, I would love to run for office. I think I would do a great job in any office if I were elected to it. But good God, what sort of psychopath, what sort of a monster does that to his family? Well, the obvious answer is the people that we have elected. They are the sort of psychopaths, the sort of monsters, the sort of corrupt invertebrates that would do that to their family. And don't get it twisted, I like Matt Gaetz, I do. But only in so much as you can like a politician. One of the things I love about Donald Trump, right? You know, he's technically a politician now. But he did that after he raised his family. You know, okay, he's got one young son that's a teenager. But by the time Donald Trump was running for office, most of his kids were grown men and women with family of their own. And part of that is, let's face it, as great a president as Donald Trump was, he was probably too old for the job when he originally got it. He's definitely too old for the job now, but he's still the best shot that we've got at world peace at cheap gas. And I want y'all to keep saying world peace at cheap gas, world peace at cheap gas. That should be Donald Trump's entire campaign, world peace at cheap gas. So anyway, with respect to what's going on with all the shutdown argument and the deal cutting, Matt Gaetz accuses Kevin McCarthy of cutting a secret side deal with Joe Biden. Congressman Matt Gaetz continued to attack Kevin McCarthy on Monday over the House Republican Speaker's successful efforts to avoid a government shutdown, even as other hard-right lawmakers came to McCarthy's defense. I hate it when they say hard-right lawmakers, because we really do not have any legitimately hard-right conservative lawmakers. Like, I want to like Marjorie Taylor Greene, but she's an adulteress. To say that they're hard right, this article comes from The Guardian, by the way. To say that they're hard right is a weak tea commentary. Speaking on the House floor on Monday, Gaetz rallied against McCarthy, accusing the speaker of cutting a secret side deal with Joe Biden to provide additional funding to Ukraine. I have a question for you, Guardian. Is there any funding for Ukraine coming along? The stopgap spending measure passed by Congress on Saturday, which extended government funding through November 17th, did not include additional money for Ukraine, and it shouldn't. But members of both parties have called for a supplemental bill to address that omission. It is not an omission to stop funding war in Ukraine. There are no good guys. The Ukrainians don't deserve our money. Let them die. I know it sounds callous. I know it sounds cold. And I know, and to a great extent I agree, that Russia is an enemy. The traditional take, the idea that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It doesn't work like that. Okay? If you have a powerful enemy who is about to have overcome you in war, and that enemy has an enemy that attacks them, then you can say that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Right? Because the enemy that is attacking you and the enemy that is not your enemy, but is the enemy of your enemy, intervenes and creates an opening where you can take advantage. That is a strategic gap that you cannot tactically afford to ignore. This is true. Now, for example, you're being hunted through the woods by a lion. The lion has treed you. It is about to start climbing. And out of nowhere, a bear runs in and starts fighting the lion. Notice I didn't say it runs in and kills the lion. Runs in and starts fighting the lion. Now the pair of them are locked in mortal combat. And you can quietly slip down that tree and get away. That bear, if it wins, if it eats the lion, is not suddenly your new snuggle buddy. Now let's take this a little bit different. This analogy is more representative of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. You are on a hike through the woods, and you come across a lion and a bear locked in mortal combat. Neither of them was chasing or hunting you. You happen to discover them as they are killing one another. And so you run over and start dumping fire. You just start dumping gasoline and setting one on fire. You run over and set the lion on fire because for whatever reason, you've just decided to intervene on behalf of the bear. That lion is going to die. And now, you are standing there with a wounded, desperate, hungry, and angry bear, which you cannot outrun, and which you have just freed to direct his attention in your direction. The point being, you have come across a conflict in which you have no dog. You do not have a dog in this fight. And if you did, I would recommend that you leave the dog and run. But you don't have a dog in this fight. And you ran up and interjected yourself to your own detriment. This is even worse. This is even worse. Because the Ukraine engineered and demanded this fight with Russia, all the while loudly proclaiming that it is essentially a protectorate of the United States, and tried to play politics with its UN membership. The Ukraine started this conflict. Joe Biden intentionally funded Russia to extend, exacerbate, and initiate this conflict, because the Biden crime syndicate needed a perpetual war footing to continue laundering money into Democrat campaigns. It really is that simple. We have the war in Ukraine because, having botched Afghanistan the Democrats need a new money laundering campaign. If peace were to suddenly break out in the European bloc, in the East European bloc nations, then we would absolutely be at war with China. Not because China are a bunch of evil communists. That's just a convenient fact. But because the Democrat National Committee cannot operate without an ongoing money laundering campaign. So, Dawson says all that gas money is a dog. I don't think Ukraine started this. We started this. We overthrew the Ukrainian government with NGOs. Not exactly. You need to go, Dawson. You need to go watch. Damn, what's his name? Volodymyr Zelensky, playing the piano with his pecker, and that'll give you a better idea of what exactly is going on over there. Or go, guys. If you haven't watched it yet, go watch the interview that I did with Jack Barsky, the KGB spy, where we discussed the foreign policy issues surrounding Russia and Ukraine. I cannot overstate the value of this man's insight on the issue. Jack Barsky was a Russian spy, right? Lived in America as a U.S. citizen from 79 to 89. Until he was busted confessing to his wife about his KGB work, and the FBI caught him on a hot mic that they had planted in the smoke detector in his kitchen. That's a real person. That's a thing that really happened. And the interview is up on the Brushfire Mind channel on YouTube and I think Rumble. So go check out the Brushfire Mind interview with Jack Barsky about the Ukraine stuff. And now it's 8 o'clock, and I've barely even talked about the McCarthy thing, but the McCarthy thing is this. Basically, Matt Gaetz, who, again, I like Gaetz, but he's still a politician. Matt Gaetz is moving to vacate the chair that McCarthy holds as Speaker of the House. And in large part, it's based on this claim. Speaking on the House floor Monday, Gaetz rallied against McCarthy, accused the Speaker of cutting a secret side deal with Joe Biden to provide additional funding to Ukraine. The stopgap spending measure passed by Congress on Saturday, which extended government funding through November 17th, did not include additional money for Ukraine, but members of both parties have called for a supplemental bill to address that omission. This goes back to what I was talking about earlier about the Republicans being a weak exemplar, a weak champion for liberty, democracy, and prosperity in the United States. We have a lot of Republicans who honestly believe, or at least have taken the infinitely bribable position that funding needs to go to the Ukraine. I would go so far, in fact, as to say that it would be more correct to say that the Republican Party has been infiltrated by, I don't want to say Republicans in name only, because that suggests that phrase rhino suggests that the person is actually a Republican but doesn't do anything. We're talking about something more like active covert operatives. Jack Barsky's, right? We're talking about a Democrat National Committee that is in bed with China and Russia, have been for quite some time. And those are enemies who have a history of very skillfully creating infiltration agents who enter and appear for all viable purposes to be what they purport to be, for the purpose of conducting operations of sabotage. It would not, in fact, surprise me to find that half of the Republican Party and all of the Democrat Party were such foreign operatives. It's not an unreasonable conclusion to at least become suspicious of, with only the evidence of their specific actions, which have the clear and obviously predictable outcomes of causing significant harm to this country. Obamacare is a great example of that. No intelligent person was able to look at Obamacare and not say, this is going to be an economic disaster. It's engineered to be an economic disaster. And then, after we had a bunch of people make the argument, this isn't going to be an economic disaster, it's going to be the best thing in the world for poor people, we got Gruber on tape explaining, no, the whole point was for this to be an economic disaster so that the government would have no choice but to embrace a total European-style socialized medical program. I think I'm rambling and far off topic now, but let me come back around to Gaetz and McCarthy and kind of put a pin in this one and wrap it up. So we had a lot of fun cracking jokes about McCarthy when he failed to win the vote like 15 or 16 times, and then he finally got in. And his getting in was predicated on agreeing to some stipulations demanded by Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and their like. And early on, once he was actually elected, we've continued to crack some jokes about him, but I'll be fair. He has stuck to some of those deals, not all of them, but I was generally impressed that he made some of them, including the deal to pursue an impeachment against Joe Biden based on his obvious criminal activity. And we appear to be getting some traction there. But doing good isn't necessarily good enough. And I ask you, if there are any Republicans at all who are funneling money, and let's be clear, not just funneling money to the Ukraine, but specifically funneling money away from American border security to the national security of another nation that we cannot reasonably give a fuck about, then those Republicans need to be voted out of office and replaced with actual Republicans. We have enough Democrats. Resign, you shitbags. So, I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in it right there, guys. Thanks for watching this morning. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.